Susanna's neck and head were still in the doorway, and I grabbed her hand. Without saying a word, I pulled her away, and we ran down the hallway and continued running until we fled the house and eventually reached the shore, breathing mighty hard. Around us were 3 high cliffs, with the castle far away on our right, the manor on the left, and the black harbour in front of us. I heard my sister gasping for air, and when she finally had caught her breath, she grew silent and remained quiet for several minutes before I whispered. Well, I suppose he was quite furious, but the only response was my sister's crying. She leaned back on the cold sand, turned away from the manor looking down on us, and wept herself into silence. I remained looking at the dark tide rolling into the shore under the pitch black sky. Soon I was asleep once more. I woke early in the morning, shivering in the cold, misty air of the shore. I turned over and saw Susanna wasn't there. She stood in the shallow water, letting the tide wash her bare feet. "Ain't you cold, sister?" I asked. "I suppose I am," she replied, "but my feet need cleaning." She was holding her working boots high above the calm waves rippling on the shores. "Sis, what are we going to do now?" I asked. She responded, "Well, I reckon we can't go back to the manor no more. The butler probably don't want to see 2 naughty little mites not respecting his hospitality. I figure we're just 2 disrespectful brats not deserving any sympathy." Sister put her head down in shame for a second, then stared at me like she had disappointed me. "Sis, I'm hungry. I want breakfast, even if it's that oily cold fish soup." My sister's face tightened as she closed her eyes and briefly stuck out her tongue in disgust. I couldn't tell if she was thinking about the food or maybe her own sins. But then she looked down in the sand. I don't even think we ever thanked him for taking us in and giving us a place to rest our heads. That morning, we built more sandcastles, but I was getting restless with this. The 2 of us had spent our lives stuck on an island, and now we were trapped on this shore. Behind us, the high cliffs were covered in green bushes. I reckon that's where the green patches on the globe began. "Sis, maybe somebody else lives round here and won't know what disrespectful little rogues we are." Sister laughed. "Mattie, sweet Mattie, you ain't a bad boy. Sister, I'm sorry I got you into this mess." "Mattie, I am the oldest. I should have never let you or myself venture into business that doesn't pertain to us. Having come from the sea and ventured once to the right in the direction of the castle, and having fled from our transgressions in the manner of our shame on the left, we headed up the one remaining direction. We turned round and faced the high cliffs, too high to climb. Fortunately, we found a trail that, while steep, afforded us the opportunity to reach the head of the cliff. I suppose when we reached the top and peered out on the other side, I was expecting to see wide green fields and farm animals and wolves running about. Instead, we came to a muddy trail that led through a desolate, yellow, grassy plain before finally spying a lonely black oak tree twisted with outstretched arms like a wrinkled woman begging for an alm. The tree was mostly leafless except for a few blue leaves scattered about, and in the distance lay a tiny grey stone cottage, almost as small as our cottage on the island. We walked for a while before standing in front of a small wooden gate and tiny wooden fence that closed off a dense garden fronting the cottage. On the gate were carved letters I could not read, but it looked frightening. Susanna tried to spell it out, Fortunesreadhere. "What's it say, sister?" I queried. Susanna told me once she'd attended briefly a school in the village across the sound from our island before our mother died and we were forced to help Boris tend the lighthouse. "It's warning us not to enter, Mattie. That's all I figure," Susanna reasoned. "Well, I suppose we're just 2 children looking for a bite to eat. Reckon it won't matter if we go and ask for a morsel to feed our tired bones." So we climbed over the rather short wooden fence and into a thick, fragrant garden split by a winding, moss-covered stone path that led to the tiny cottage. As we crept down the rocky trail, I looked through the thick greenery on the left. Fear hastily snatched me, and I screamed, "Susanna, look! It's a monster big and frightening enough to eat us." Susanna snickered. "Mattie, I think it's just a flower." But to me, it appeared as a monstrous figure, taller than Boris, the tallest man I'd ever known. towering with a green leg jutting towards the sky. This beast was wearing a humongous upside-down purple skirt. In fact, the whole beast seemed upturned. Maybe it's a woman monster, I pondered, peering at its bottom where I saw its green neck sticking into the ground. Indeed, this monster was all upside down, its head buried in the earth wearing an enormous purple skirt, but not long enough to cover its one green leg sticking nearly 7 feet up in the air. I was relieved its head was 'neath the ground, meaning it couldn't see my sister and me and decide to make us its next meal. I recoiled as the beast's putrid scent wafted about us, and Susanna laughed. "Mattie, it's just a flower, I tell you." But I wasn't too confident in my sister's judgment. Truth be told, the place spooked me no small amount. On either side of the stone path were velvety black flowers, with petals unfolding like layers of stars, towering nearly as tall as Susanna and me. To our right stood a gnarled old apple tree, which contained dozens of plump apples, but below many rotten apples had fallen in the high weeds. Near the tree, I spotted rows of carrots and berries. All around the garden were pudgy little babies, the ugliest you'd ever see, with green leafy sprouts coming out of their heads. "Susanna, somebody planted those babies in the dirt," I exclaimed. Susanna chuckled. "I think those are called mandrakes. Boris put them near our village cottage when our mum was sick, saying they'd ward off evil spirits of sickness." I gasped. "Mandrakes! I heard sailors say mandrakes are what witches use to place curses on people. This here be a witch's cottage, Susanna," I cried. Susanna snickered. "Well, let's hope she's a good witch, Mattie," I responded. "Sister, all witches are pure evil." "That's what the sailors say, and they've travelled all over the world." Susanna suddenly screamed and grabbed my hand as squawking pierced the air. I looked up and saw 2 black-as-night crows eating a man made of yellow straw. The poor man wore working clothes and a crooked black hat. His face looked like a ditty bag with an evil, smirking grin painted on. The poor man had a pole poking right through his body and 2 other poles jutting out of his sleeves. I suppose he wanted to eat the carrots and berries beside him. And maybe that's why crows were pecking on him so hard, punishing him for his crimes. "Susanna," I said, "let's escape this garden." I looked at Susanna's face, and it was as scared as mine, and she nodded. "I agree, brother. We should leave for we can't escape." We dashed to the gate, but the air grew as thick as the ocean. The more forceful I ran, the more I seemed stuck in one place. I tried grabbing Susanna, but my arms were heavy as iron. Susanna too stood frozen in place. From behind, I heard an awful cackling. "Looky there, 2 little morsels. Want to join me for dinner? Just the ingredients I need in my soup." "Ha ha! How you 2 little mites will complement the stew I'm a-brewing." I tried screaming, but something had a hold of my tongue. The green around me dissolved until all was black. Then, what could have been a minute or an hour late, bright fire pierced through my closed eyes. I heard that awful jeering and spied a fire burning brightly before us. I was sitting next to Susanna, and we were tied in knots inside that little cottage where leaping flames heated a big black pot. An ancient bald woman draped in a black cloak and a bounty of wrinkles sniggled haughtily my face, spraying me with her foul, steamy breath. "You dirty children need a good clean. How about I plop you into that boiling pot just in time for dinner?" I saw the flames were burning mightily intense, and I thought after escaping Boris, the sea monsters, sharks, ghosts, this is how my sister and I meet our end. Burned alive in a witch's pot. Maybe Boris was correct. We were 2 disrespectful brats needing to be punished.